My name is Daniel. I've been hiking since I was a teenager, and I've done a decent chunk of the Appalachian Trail in segments over the years. Nothing about what I'm about to describe has ever happened to me before or after, and I've thought about it pretty much every day since October of 2018. I was doing a solo section hike through a stretch of the trail in Virginia, nothing crazy, just a 4-day trip, solo, which I had done before. I had all my gear, I knew the terrain, and I was comfortable being out there by myself. That part I want to make clear, because people always assume something must have gone wrong beforehand, or that I was unprepared. I wasn't. Everything about that trip was totally normal right up until it wasn't. It was the second afternoon. I had been hiking since early morning, and the miles were going well. I had my headphones in for part of the morning, but I took them out around noon because I always like to just listen to the trail when I'm deep enough in that there's no road noise, just birds wind through the leaves, your own footsteps on the dirt. It's actually one of my favorite parts of being out there. By late afternoon, I noticed I hadn't passed a single other hiker all day. That happens sometimes on the less trafficked sections, so I didn't think much of it. The sun was starting to drop, and I was maybe an hour and a half from the shelter I was planning to stop at for the night. I was moving at a good pace. I felt fine. And that's when I heard it. It was quiet, really quiet, almost like someone talking at a normal volume from far away. But the thing is, it wasn't far away, and it wasn't just any sound, it was my name. I pulled up short and just stood there for a second. I told myself it was the wind, or maybe I had been hiking long enough that my brain was playing tricks on me. I kept moving. A minute later, maybe less, it happened again. Same thing, just my name, just Daniel. Low and close and completely clear. I stopped again and called out, asked if someone was there. Nothing, not even the sound of someone moving through the brush, which you would definitely hear on a trail like that. Total silence other than the trees. I kept walking, but faster now. I wasn't panicking yet, but I was definitely uncomfortable. Something about the way the voice sounded was really getting to me, and I couldn't immediately figure out why. It took me probably another 5 minutes of walking before I figured it out. It sounded like my sister, not vaguely like her, exactly like her. The specific way she would say my name when she was trying to get my attention, which made absolutely no sense because she was back home in Maryland. That was the moment I started moving fast, like really fast. I wasn't running, but I was as close to it as you can get with a loaded pack. And the whole time I'm just scanning the trees on both sides of the trail, trying to figure out if there's someone out there. I never saw anything, not a person, not an animal, nothing. It happened 2 more times before I got to the shelter. Once from somewhere ahead of me on the trail, which stopped me cold because I was moving toward it, and once from directly behind me when I was close enough to the shelter to see the roof through the trees. That last one, I will honestly never forget as long as I live, because it wasn't just my name that time. It said, "Don't come back out here." I got to the shelter, and there were 2 other hikers already there, a couple doing a longer through section. I was pretty visibly shaken, and one of them asked me immediately if I was all right. I told them what happened. I gave them the full version. I expected them to laugh, or at least look skeptical. Neither of them laughed. The woman looked at her partner and then back at me. She said something that I've never been able to shake. She told me this was the 3rd time she'd heard a story like this on that specific stretch of trail. Not voices in general, she clarified. Voices that sounded like people you knew. Personal voices. Your name said exactly the way someone close to you would say it. I asked her what she thought it was. She didn't have an answer. Her partner mentioned that there were a few older local accounts he'd read about from people in the area. Not hikers, just residents. Going back a long time, he said some of them described the same thing. A voice you recognize coming from somewhere it shouldn't be. I didn't sleep that night. I laid in my sleeping bag listening to every single sound outside, and there were a lot of them. The woods at night are loud when you're actually paying attention. I kept expecting to hear it again. I never did. But that almost made it worse somehow, just waiting for it. I packed up before sunrise, and I moved quickly. I didn't stop until I was back at my car at the trailhead. And even then, I sat in the driver's seat for a solid 10 minutes before I drove anywhere, just kind of processing everything. I called my sister when I got cell service. She picked up on the second ring. I asked her if anything weird had happened the day before. She said no. Why? I told her I'd explain later. I never fully did. To this day, I don't have a rational explanation for what I heard out there. I've tried. Wind doing something strange, another hiker I never saw, my own exhausted brain manufacturing something that wasn't there. I've run through all of it. None of it holds up when I think about that second time, the one where it came from, ahead of me on the trail, because whatever it wasn't behind me anymore. It had moved, it knew where I was going. I haven't done a solo hike since. My friends think I just got tired of the solitude. I let them think that. It's easier than the truth, which is that I'm genuinely not sure I could handle hearing my name out there again, especially if it told me something I didn't want to hear. My name is Rachel. I was a volunteer with a search and rescue team out of Eugene, Oregon. And what I'm about to tell you is something I've been sitting on for a long time. I've talked to maybe 3 people about it in total. My husband, my sister, and one of the other volunteers who was there and saw the same things I saw. We all came to the same conclusion, and none of us have really been able to move past it. In late September of 2020, a group of 4 campers went missing in a forested area roughly 2 hours outside of Eugene. I'm going to keep the specific location vague because I honestly don't want to send people out there, and also because authorities were pretty insistent from early on that the details stay quiet. What I can tell you is that it was a remote area, not a developed campground, and the group had gone out there specifically because it was off the beaten path. 2 guys, 2 girls, all in their mid to late 20s. They were experienced campers. That's been confirmed. This wasn't a situation where 4 people with no idea what they were doing wandered into the wilderness and got lost. They were reported missing after 3 days when none of them had contacted their families. A search was launched, and by the second day of searching, the team located their campsite. Everything was there. Both tents still standing and staked down properly. Their food supply was stored correctly, untouched. Sleeping bags laid out inside the tents like someone had just gotten up to use the bathroom and hadn't come back. 4 cell phones, car keys. One of the girls had apparently been keeping a handwritten journal, and it was sitting open on top of her sleeping bag like she had just set it down. I was in the second group of volunteers to reach the campsite, and by the time we got there, the initial team had already done a sweep of the immediate area. One of the lead coordinators pulled a few of us aside and mentioned they had found a camera, a regular digital point and shoot, the kind people used before phone cameras got as good as they are now. It had been sitting on top of a camp stool near the fire pit, not dropped, not knocked over, just sitting there like someone had set it down intentionally. I didn't see the images that first day. The camera was taken in as part of the evidence collection, and our job was to keep expanding the search radius. But 2 days later, when it became clear we weren't finding anything, a couple of us were brought in to review some of the material from the site to see if anything could help narrow down what direction they might have gone. That's when I saw the photos. The first several dozen were completely normal. Exactly what you'd expect from a camping trip. Setting up the tents, cooking over the fire, people laughing and making faces at the camera, daytime shots of the tree line, some decent landscape photos, nothing remotely concerning. It actually made it harder to look at in a way because these were clearly 4 people just having a good time. Normal people on a normal trip. Then the pictures from the second night started. The timestamp showed they were taken starting around 2 in the morning. The first few were still relatively normal, just dark. Campfire burning low, the kind of photo you take when you're sitting up late and you're bored and you just point the camera at something. But then there was a gap of about 20 minutes where no photos were taken, and when they started again, the camera was pointed in a completely different direction. Away from the campfire. Into the trees. 12 photos in total from that point. All taken within about 4 minutes of each other based on the timestamps. I'm going to be careful about how I describe what I saw in those images because I've thought a lot about what could rationally explain it. In the first few, you're just looking at dark forest, trees, shadows, the kind of thing that looks like nothing in particular. But by the 4th or 5th photo, there was something in the frame that I couldn't immediately account for. A shape between the trees that didn't look like a tree. It was tall, genuinely very tall, and I don't mean slightly above average. I mean disproportionately tall in a way that made the surrounding trees look wrong by comparison. By the 8th photo, it was closer. You could make out more of it, and that was honestly worse because the closer it got, the less it looked like something I could explain away. The proportions were off. The arms, or what looked like arms, hung too low. It wasn't moving in any of the individual frames, obviously because they're photos, but the progression from image to image made it unmistakably clear that whatever it was had been approaching the campsite across those 4 minutes. The last photo, I've thought about this one more than I probably should. The figure was close enough that the camera flash reflected back off of it partially. And what caught my eye immediately, what I couldn't stop looking at even after I put the camera down, were 2 points of light in roughly the area where a face would be. Catch light. The kind your eyes produce when a flash hits them directly. Whatever was in that photo had eyes that caught the light. No bodies were ever found. The official search was eventually suspended and the case was reclassified, though I was never told exactly how. The camera images were never released publicly, and I was told in no uncertain terms not to discuss the specific contents with anyone outside the investigation. I've respected that for the most part. I still respect it now, which is why I'm keeping certain details out of this. What I'll say is this. I've been on a number of searches over the years. I've seen a lot of difficult things, and I've learned how to process them and move on. I have not been able to do that with this one. The other volunteer I mentioned, the one I've talked to about it, he told me the same thing. He said whatever was in those photos, it wasn't something either of us had ever seen before, and he's been doing search and rescue for almost 15 years. I don't go into heavily forested areas alone anymore. I don't really have a better way to end this than that. I just don't. My name is Carol. I worked dispatch for a ranger station in Montana for 11 years, and I can tell you without any hesitation that the night of October 3rd, 2015 was the worst night of my professional life. Worse than the accident calls. Worse than the medical emergencies. Worse than anything else that came across that radio in over a decade of sitting at that desk. I've never spoken about this publicly, and honestly, I'm not entirely comfortable doing it now, but enough time has passed. And I think about Eric every single day, and I feel like the story deserves to be told by someone who was actually there for it. Eric had been a ranger with us for 6 years at that point. He was one of the most experienced people on the team, and genuinely one of the most level-headed people I've ever met in my life. I want to make that very clear before I get into anything else. Eric was not someone who rattled easily. He had dealt with aggressive wildlife, medical emergencies deep in the backcountry, lost hikers in terrible conditions. The man was calm in situations that would have most people completely falling apart. I knew him well enough to know that if something was bothering Eric, something was genuinely wrong. He went out on a routine evening patrol at around 7:30. That section of the park was one he had covered hundreds of times. There was nothing unusual about the assignment, and nothing unusual about his check-in at 9:15, which was completely normal. He reported his location, said conditions were clear, and signed off. Standard stuff. I actually remember thinking when he checked in that it was going to be a quiet night. The call that came in at 9:40 was not a standard check-in. The radio opened, and I could tell immediately from the way he spoke that something had shifted. He wasn't panicked. I want to be precise about that because panicked would almost be easier to explain, and he was controlled but alert in a way I hadn't heard from him before. He said he was picking up unusual animal sounds in the area north of his position. I asked him to describe them, and he took a moment before answering. He said they were low, almost like a growl, but not quite right. He said the rhythm of it was off, like it was stopping and starting in a way that didn't sound natural. I asked if he needed backup out there, and he said not yet, he just wanted to flag it and keep eyes on the area. I told him to stay on the line with me, and he did for about 3 minutes, mostly quiet, just the sound of him moving through brush. Then he stopped moving, and there was a pause, and he said, "I think something is following me." I asked him to clarify. I kept my voice even because that's the job. You stay calm so the person in the field stays calm. He said it was staying in the tree line off to his left and matching his pace when he moved. I asked him if he could get a visual on it, and he was quiet for a few seconds, and then he said it's walking on 2 legs. I remember writing that down on my notepad, even as he said it. Just the automatic reflex of logging everything. It's walking on 2 legs. The words looked strange written down. I asked him if it could be another person. He said he didn't know. He said the way it was moving didn't look right. I told him to head back toward his vehicle and call out to whoever it was. He said okay, and I heard him call out once. Firm voice, identifying himself as a park ranger. Whatever was out there didn't respond. Then there was silence on the line for close to 20 seconds. Not dead air. I could still hear the connection was live, just silence. And then I heard his breathing change. Slower, heavier, like someone trying to control their breathing when they're scared and doing their best not to show it. His last transmission was 4 words. He said, "It's mimicking me." And the radio cut out. I called back immediately, no response. I tried 4 more times over the next 2 minutes. Nothing. I dispatched a team to his last known coordinates right away. And I sat at that desk for the rest of the night waiting for any kind of update. They found his vehicle the next morning. Doors open on the driver's side. Engine still running. His pack was on the passenger seat. Everything in it. Radio, flashlight, first aid kit. All of it. The only thing missing from that vehicle was Eric. The search team spent 3 days covering that area. No blood, no physical signs of any kind of struggle, no indication of an animal attack. They documented his boot prints on the trail leading away from the vehicle, and those prints simply stopped in a clearing about a quarter mile in. No other tracks around them, just his, and then nothing. On the second day of the search, 2 of the team members reported something while sweeping a section of trail they had already cleared earlier that morning. They heard a voice calling for help from somewhere in the woods off to the east. Both of them independently said the same thing when they came back to give their report. They said it sounded exactly like Eric. Not similar, exactly like him, the specific cadence of his voice, the way he talked. They moved toward it. The voice kept moving, always the same distance away, no matter how fast they went. And then it stopped entirely. When they reoriented themselves, they realized they were deep into a section of the park that had been completely swept already. There was nothing there. I think about that detail more than any other part of this because earlier that same week, I had a conversation with Eric during a slow shift, and he mentioned he had been reading about something. Old accounts from people in remote areas, going back a long time. Stories about sounds in the wilderness that mimicked things, animals, people, voices you recognized. He mentioned it kind of offhand, and then we moved on to something else, and I forgot about it completely until the night of that call. He said it before the radio cut out. He knew exactly what it was doing. That's what I can't get past. He recognized it in real time. Eric was never found. The case remains open to my knowledge. I left my position at the station about 8 months after it happened. I couldn't go back to that desk. I still can't explain what he encountered out there. But I believe every word of what he told me. Because Eric didn't say things he wasn't sure of. That was just who he was.